Hello and welcome to a brand new Arsblog Arscast right here on arsblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for tuning in, for subscribing, for listening, for all your feedback, comments, tweets, Facebook messages, Discord messages, emails, telegrams, things written on vellum with a quill. Thank you for all your feedback. We really, really do appreciate it very much indeed. Hope you're well. I've been having a carb-free week. Is it to get rid of the excess Christmas pounds? If I speak, I am in big trouble. But all I will say is that carbs are really delicious. Carbohydrates in their many forms are I miss them. I miss them a lot. I mean, vegetables are nice and eggs are nice and fruit, I guess, is nice, and, you know, some chicken and fish and meat. It's nice. It's nice, sure. But where are the chips? Where's the bread? Where's the pasta? Where's the beer? Where's the breakfast cereal? No Frosties or even cornflakes or Ricicles. Well, you can't have Ricicles because they stopped making them, which is basically a crime against humanity. But am I feeling good? Am I feeling better? Am I feeling slimmer? I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to see what the end of the week brings. And I know there's probably a load of dietologists and nutrimongers out there who have got all this expertise who are saying this is not a sustainable way to do it. I know. But when it comes down to it, the whole weight loss thing comes down to just eating less and exercising more. Join the Arsblog weight loss program. It's called Arse Shed. Shed Arse. I don't know. For just $29.99 a month, we'll send you delicious recipes that you can pyramid scheme. We got a show for you today. Arsenal appear to be on the brink of signing someone in the transfer market. It's a left back, a guy from PSG by the name of Layvin Kurzawa. It's a strange kind of a signing. There's a lot to unpack in it, so we're going to do that a little bit later on in the show. We're going to look at why we might be interested from a footballing point of view and why this particular player. Should we be worried? We do have a problem at left back because Tierney is out and Kolasinac is also out and playing through injury. But this guy, is he the right man for the right reasons? We will explore that a little bit later on in the show. But now, I'm delighted to welcome to the Arscast. It's been a while since we've spoken to her, and it is the first time we have spoken to her since Mikel Arteta took over. From The Athletic, it's Amy Lawrence. Hi, Amy.
Hey, Andrew. Good to speak to you.
And you. How are you feeling, generally speaking? I know we all had some difficult times, towards the latter stages of the Unai Emery era. Things weren't great. Just, a general feeling on how things have been going in the few weeks that Mikel Arteta has been in charge.
I suppose the general feeling is of I don't know, coming out of prison or something, or, being stuck in a dark place and suddenly the sunshine comes streaming in, or I don't know, you've had all stress, knots in your shoulders and you go for a massage and you come out and feel, that sense of relief. Okay, I may be slightly over-exaggerating, but there's definitely a lightness overall, just because I think things had got so bleak towards the latter stages of the Unai Emery time. And, I think that we spoke before, and just that sense of how much longer can this go on, because it felt so damaging to the club. It felt like with every passing week and every passing bad result that the kind of problems were getting so much deeper that actually digging a way out of them was by definition going to take that much longer. So from that point of view, trying to encapsulate the shift that is in a relatively small space of time. I mean, I don't know, what are we talking, 3-4 weeks? A handful of games under Mikel Arteta. My overall feeling, even though results haven't been perfect the whole way through, is that I'm actually quite astonished that almost any manager, let alone someone who'd never actually taken charge of a team by himself before, could have engineered as much sort of positive reaction as has happened. I almost can't compliment him enough for that, because it did feel like, and I think still is, the same feeling that the scale of the job remains quite massive. Most people are not under any illusions on that front. But to make all of those players, and I mean all of them, feel so much better about themselves. Because if you analyse the squad and you look at them individually, I don't think there's a single player that doesn't look happier. And
better.
Then if you just gauge the mood amongst the fan base, amongst people who work at the club, just the whole feel is, it seems like there's something positive to cling to. It's like Arsenal have been, we're floundering in the waves and in a storm, and somebody's thrown them a lifebelt, and that's Mikel Arteta. And for one guy who's still in his 30s and hasn't been a manager for very long, to have achieved that alone is fairly amazing.
I know. I mean, some people with a more cynical outlook would say, look, Arsenal have beaten Man United, they've beaten Leeds, but they drew against Bournemouth, they drew against Crystal Palace at the weekend, they lost to Chelsea. So, it hasn't been brilliant, but my argument on that is I think there are just signs of progress. There are things that you can look at in all of those games and say, well, that's good, that's something we can build on, it's something we can learn from. I think the improvement, certainly from a defensive point of view, which I think for me is the most interesting aspect of this, because I guess people would have seen Arteta as a possession-based coach, an attacking coach. He's worked with Pep. We know how Pep likes to attack, and how his team, his philosophy is based on having the ball in the opposition half, etc., etc. But Arteta's come in and, like you say, turned a sort of motley crew of midfielders and defenders, some of whom look to be kind of out the door, or if not out the door, you wouldn't mind giving them a good kick out the door. Before this, to have sort of brought about that kind of a change, I think for me that's the most impressive part, regardless of results. And I'm not saying results aren't important, but I think we can read into the performances and take really positive things from them.
Yeah, and I think that the expectation levels have to be factored in, and you can only really assess those results on the basis of the situation that he walked into, and walking into a club at Christmas time where there's so many problems and the league position is already so serious that, let's be honest, a top, the kind of turnaround, the kind of magic, sort of stroke of the wand where everything that was bad is suddenly phenomenal. We have to be realistic here, and he has only got certain tools to work with. And while most people would accept that Arsenal squad needed to be doing a lot better than it was doing, it's also not a squad that is yet ready to be up there pushing, especially after such a bad start. There's so much ground to be made up. The beginning of the season, I definitely remember looking at the squad, and you're thinking of Tierney and Bellerin coming back and Holding, and it was just signed Pepe. There was a lot of room for optimism. Let's not forget that. No. But unfortunately, Mikel Arteta has not come into a situation where that Arsenal went at the beginning of the season. The players and everything about the feelings that they had about how they were playing had a lot of hits and had a lot of damage. So, it's a great thing, and I'm fascinated to know what the club and him and the players really think is achievable this season. I was going
to ask you that. What do you think would constitute a good season for Arsenal? Is it some kind of tangible success in a cup competition? Is it getting ourselves back into the Europa League? When you consider the ambition at the start of the season would have been to get back into the Champions League, we have had to reassess where we are and what we're capable of. Or is it simply a case that whatever happens this season, we use it as a kind of a learning tool, about the players that we have at the club at the moment and where the gaps are that need to be filled during the summer? So regardless of, what happens in these next, 5 months, whatever it might be, that if we learn enough from it, and as a club, and I know this is maybe, being a bit optimistic, and we'll talk about some of the people above Mikel Arteta in a minute, is it about preparing ourselves for the first significant part of the rebuild, which has to happen in the summer?
I think it should be, Andrew. It would be really lovely to be able to sit here and say, yeah, there's no reason why this team can't win the FA Cup or can't win the Europa League and can't get back in the Champions League. And who knows, maybe if things click, they'll go on a great run and win every game and maybe even get into the top four because people are inconsistent, etc. So I think it's a time for a bit of circumspection and just letting this man who has talent, who has energy, who is understandable in what the things are that he's trying to achieve, let him do his work. It's time for the fans to just try and be supportive and back off a bit, and the media and everyone else who makes judgments. And I think that Arteta is such a competitive animal, and he's got such high standards that I'm sure he looks at his team and thinks there's no reason why Arsenal shouldn't actually try their damnedest to win something this season, and with a bit of luck might make it happen. But there's 2 cup competitions, and the chances are you're going to face some tough tests, along that path. Look, hard enough for 45 minutes against Leeds, let's be honest. So, but you have to just almost do that thing where you hope for the best and enjoy the moment for what it can give to you. And I agree with you that the critical thing is a really in-depth forensic examination of this squad and its capabilities. It's almost like really this next few months should be a bit of a trial period for all concerned, and it's entirely dependent on how much backing there is from Mikel Arteta to make the changes that he thinks are necessary to really press on. But, even when the squad is playing at their best and the team's playing at the best of their abilities, and they're still not quite, there's a lot of improvements, but there hasn't been a whole 90 minutes so far that's been great. The Man United one is the closest because they had to show 2 different characteristics within that game. A dominant period and a kind of hanging on period and being resilient, and Arsenal managed both really, really well in that game. But in terms of a full game of having a plan, being authoritative, doing a great job from start to finish, and looking seriously impressive, that's still to come. But I feel for Arteta because he's got kind of hands tied behind his back to an extent with injuries, and obviously in the case of Aubameyang, suspensions, players still trying to come back and find some form. It's what he's doing is really incredible given the resources that he's working with on a day-to-day basis so far, and each little bit of an improvement is important. But everybody can look at the squad and think, in a dream scenario, you'd be maybe looking at another player in a certain key position. And there might be some players who might want to go. You have to factor that in as well. This is an interesting summer ahead. And I'm really interested by how much the board and the ownership and the Football Executive Committee take some the strength of the guidance they take from Arteta,
yes,
versus Emery or versus the latter days of Arsene Wenger. How much of what is going on in terms of deals that get done to improve and upgrade the squad, how much of that is going to be coming from the Football Executive Committee? How much of it is coming from Mikel Arteta? How much of it is going to come from the level of backing that the Kroenkes are willing to give in terms of be ambitious, be excited sort of messaging that came through last summer.
Sure, I mean, look,
they certainly they were. You can't fault what they did in terms of Pepe and backing the club to spend some money. It's up to the club it's not really up to the Kroenkes how they spent it, but they certainly allowed them to invest not just in Pepe, but I still think William Saliba, who nobody talks about, all being well, is such an exciting thing to come into the club next summer. Yeah. And that could go down as an absolute masterstroke that the Cronkies backed the club to get over the line last summer, when they obviously, there was a certain amount of finite money that was available to spend, and some of it got used there.
I mean, the appointment of Arteta has, we're all in this kind of honeymoon period where we're looking at what he does and we're enthused and we're excited, and the potential we can all see is there, and the hope and the expectation that it's sort of like a new signing, isn't it? In a way, when you bring in a
like
new signing,
new signing.
he is kind of because you sign a player, and regardless of everything else, maybe it's just me, but I always kind of think the best of most signings. There are some that we've made over the last few years where I go, okay, right, maybe not, but in general, a new player comes in and you sort of set the bar really high for what it is they can achieve, and we're sort of there with Mikel Arteta, and we're thinking, look, there's a lot that he can do, but it has in many ways taken the spotlight off the Football Executive Committee. It's taken the spotlight off Raul Sanllehi, for example, who, as the head of football, has presided over Arsenal's worst period of form for a very long time. We ended up in a situation with Unai Emery that was just untenable. It was untenable before he was relieved of his job, despite the fact that, on high they appeared to back him for longer. Maybe that was just public posturing or whatever. But, there's no escaping the fact that as head of football, if you look at the football performance under Raul Sanllehi's auspices, they haven't been great. So, it has given him a bit of time maybe to stop and think and reflect, or maybe other people to stop and think and reflect about the work that he's been doing there. You've pointed to something like William Saliba, which is, if it works out, will go down as a very positive deal. The fact that we were willing to wait and get him in a year's time, we were that convinced about his potential. But do you see questions being asked of people in those higher positions from now on? Because if Arteta is setting standards which are as high as you say they are, and I think he is a very demanding guy, the owners ultimately are going to have to look at that as well, aren't they?
Yeah, but we can only really guess about the strength of the relationship between the Cronkies and the Football Executive Committee, because we've never had the privilege of sort of seeing them together all that much. There's, in the past been the odd cup final where, Ivan Gazidis and Stan Kroenke would be sitting in the royal box or what have you next to each other. And that's about as much insight, or in when they used to do the AGMs, kind of sitting together on that plinth awkwardly during the sort of excruciating sort of hour or so spent doing those latter day AGMs. But we're not privy to know how much respect, how much communication. I remember them ages ago when Raul and Vinay first sort of got promoted to take over from the departing Ivan Gazidis, told us the rather nice line about how they had a WhatsApp group, and you had this great image of there being sort of games going on and Raul or Vinay texting Stan or Josh or vice versa from the US. You can only imagine a kind of variation of the sort of WhatsApp messages that go around on umpteen million Arsenal groups across the planet. But I mean, it's really that acid question is how much pressure does Raul or members of the Football Executive have about their performance from their seniors. And in the same way that people used to say at the tail end of the Wenger era, when things weren't going so well, where's the pressure on Wenger coming from? Or where's the pressure on Ivan Gazidis coming from? Is it coming from their seniors, essentially their line managers in the organisation? And the feeling was that it really wasn't, that the Cronkies were very willing to trust those men to do their job in the football sense at Arsenal. And that you always had this feeling that the Cronkies were sort of backseat in this ride that everybody was on. And it was being controlled by what was Wenger and Gazidis. And then, obviously evolved. But you'd like to think that anybody in a business as massive as Arsenal, that turns over the money that it turns over, has the international scrutiny that it does across the world, the person in Raul's job or Vinay's job or Edu's job, or the people making the critical football decisions, that needs to be assessed. That needs to be appraised.
Sure.
And the biggest alarm bell I felt recently was when it came out that that Raul wanted to give Unai Emery a 3-year contract extension in autumn of this year. That just felt to me like that clanged, because the performance didn't seem to justify it or warrant it. So you're thinking, what's going on there? So certainly there is a sense that kind of high point for Raul, when everybody was idolising him almost with the Don Raul nickname and so on, when he'd had some great, exciting transfer windows, that dissipated quickly. And it just goes to show that in football, there's like this domino effect of, it all stems from results. If the results are good and the players are doing well, then there's not pressure on the manager. Once those results start to fall and the pressure's on the players, then the pressure's on the manager. And then if it continues, then the pressure goes to the next level, which is the people who appoint or would be responsible for hiring and firing of said manager. Sure. In this case, Raul. And then the next step of pressure loads further on to the owners or to the ownership. So if things are going well, there's no questions of the Kroenkes, there's no questions of Raul Sanllehi, there's no questions of, at the moment, Arteta. That's how football is. So to many ways, I suspect that the best thing that happens with the current state of affairs is that a lot of all that heat that had been beginning to be directed at more senior levels has gone quiet or quieter.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, look, if I'm looking at it from a positive point of view, Edu wasn't really involved in the summer transfer window to a great extent because he only arrived late in the summer. And, Sanllehi, as, we've spoken about before, is a deal guy. He's the guy who, schmoozes and dots the I's and crosses the T's and all that kind of stuff. He can get people in the room. He's got a contacts list and all that kind of stuff. And maybe
Arsenal needed that.
Yeah, no, sure, I agree. But what they also needed was, football expertise, and they needed people who knew football on the board. And I'm not necessarily sure that that's been the case over the last number of years. Some people perhaps who thought they knew a bit more about football than they actually did before they fucked off to AC Milan. But that's neither here nor there. Maybe if we're looking at it from a positive point of view, the influence of Edu and the fact that Edu is probably going to have a very close working relationship with Mikel Arteta. Like, I can't believe that when Mikel Arteta interviewed for the job or set out the things that he wanted to do, the idea that Raul Sanllehi, for example, could foist a player on him, I don't think that would work. I think Arteta is going to want to have a much more significant input into recruitment, both in terms of the type of player that we get and also the individual players that we get working in tandem with Edu. So that might well be a positive thing in that regard.
Looking at Arteta's pronouncements, body language, motivation, commitment, demands so far, I think augurs really, really well on that front. And while ordinarily I think it's probably just about right that there's a danger in listening too much to your head coach when you're doing your recruitment. And I think you have to factor in the fact that Arsenal's recruitment policy involves a whole mixture of things. It's obviously the kind of the insider knowledge of getting the deals over the line. You've got the backup of the whole scouting network. You've got the backup of the data analysts who, can weigh in quite heavily in terms of analysing options for a specific position. But I suspect Arteta will be... I just think the kind of guy he is, he won't have taken this job without having some sort of real confidence that he's going to be able to make Arsenal competitive. Unless he believes that the players Arsenal currently have can do that with coaching alone. And I guess most of us would accept there are some limitations there. And I'd be mad that he doesn't think that too. So let's work on the assumption he probably also sees some of those limitations. It just makes logical sense that he has needed assurances, albeit it's his first job, and maybe he had to make some compromises and won't get quite as many assurances as you'd imagine, because you can't always have perfection and it's your first job. But I'd like to think that he's going to have a certain amount of clout in terms of probably setting out in an extremely clear way to the club the areas that he feels need the most attention. And then let's just see what kind of action comes out of it.
Are you expecting anything significant to happen in January? He's playing his cards very, very close to his chest. I think we all understand that the January window is a difficult one. It's not the ideal time to do business, but obviously there are issues. And I think when you're a new coach and you go to a new club and you're just going into a transfer window, it would be surprising to me if you weren't given some backing by the club, for at least one or two players who might make a difference, even if it's only on a short-term basis between now and the end of the season, because there are still some things to play for.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think history shows that, it's unlikely that January is going to be the time where there's something major happens, unless Arsenal can stumble upon some kind of mega deal that they weren't quite expecting and can be persuaded that it's worth paying that premium that you probably have to pay in January to sort out deals. But I mean, it's hard to imagine they're going to do much beyond getting in the odd loan. The question is whether they find players that they really feel are going to be able to walk into the team straight away and add something. Because I think the scars of last January's sort of absolute fiasco with Denis Suarez just show you. I mean, that was, that deal ended up being sort of 5 or 6 million quid just thrown down the toilet.
But I mean, does that not inform what you do in January?
Whether that might go towards something in the summer, and I think you have to feel that somebody who comes in January on a short-term loan is going to be ready to help you out. And I think that's not just the physical or tactical characteristics of any player, but the psychological characteristics of a player. They've got to be able to be strong enough to walk into the side, walk into the Premier League and handle it.
Well, maybe
you don't want to risk, there was always a bit of a risk. I think that a guy like Denis Suarez, who is not known for necessarily being the most robust or influential player, that he might sort of struggle to adapt, quite apart from any injury situation or whatever. I got the impression that he wasn't even sort of that happy really while he was around the club. Did he really want to come and get stuck in his 6 months? I don't know. Or did he think, well, I'll give it a try. I know Emery, and I was at Barcelona, and it's just a short time anyway. You've got to probably make sure that those mental elements are right for a player to be able to have instant impact. Otherwise, what's the point of getting someone in on loan? Yeah,
I guess that's true. I suppose the other thing that you might say is that, if we're an injury or two away from some very difficult moments for Arteta, particularly defensively, because we don't have a left back for the upcoming game against Sheffield United at the weekend, because Kolasinac has got a thigh strain and Tierney, as we know, is out, so that's a defensive problem. Socrates and Luiz are good together at this moment in time and have obviously improved, but beyond that, we've got Rob Holding, who's finding it difficult to make his way back from a cruciate injury, and that's no criticism of him, it's just a fact. Beyond that, we have Mustafi, who nobody particularly wants to see back in the team.
He's going to be at left back. Are you kidding me?
Oh my God. Mustafi at left back on. Well, I mean, look, it might be a case that we have to play. Look, Maitland-Niles at left back, Mustafi at right back on Saturday. Who knows? I mean, we're stretched. So what I mean is that, you do have to weigh up the ability of a player to come in and do a job and be ready, but you also have to look at the depth and maybe give yourself a little bit of assurance. And if it costs you a couple of million quid just to have it there, it's probably better than not having it.
Yeah, but again, that couple of million quid, you've got to be able to put that person in the team. If you think you can get someone for a couple of million quid that you can put in the team on Saturday, then great. Then they should have signed them already. Why haven't they?
Well,
maybe there's a reason.
Yeah, maybe so. There's probably a number of reasons. But, this is Arsenal in a transfer window in January. We can all maybe put two and two together. Just final question, Amy. There is the very outside chance that Arsenal could play Champions League football next season. The Europa League is a difficult competition, as we know. Does the fact that maybe the Premier League, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, because I think Arteta is the kind of guy for whom every game matters and every game is important and everything else. But the fact that maybe at best we could finish sixth, something like that, would that allow him, if we did make some progress and we get to the quarterfinal and you start looking ahead, to prioritise a little bit in terms of that competition? Because the reward isn't simply a trophy. The reward is financial and it's prestige as well. And it's Arsenal getting back into a competition they really desperately want to be in. So, I mean, do you think there might come a point in the season where he starts to think about that in a very serious way?
He might already be. I mean, the Europa League, considering Arsenal's relationship with it as a sort of, they've clearly never given the impression that they love it, or that they've always given the impression, I think, that they feel that they are above it somehow. But the fact is, certainly this season, and to an extent last season, increasingly so, in fact, over the years of recently, Arsenal are a Europa League team. That's how it's been. And the last two seasons there were pretty close run things with the Europa League, and I don't mind admitting I felt absolutely desperate for Arsenal to win it. I was really, really up for it 2 years ago. I think it would have been just the loveliest way for Arsene Wenger to go out after his long spell at the club, and it never happened. And then last season, obviously, the rewards were so massive. The local pride issue was very painful, but more than anything else, I think it hurt just because it was so important to Arsenal. And the fact that Chelsea already had fourth place sewn up and Arsenal needed it so desperately, and it went the way it went, was a harrowing blow. But nobody was disguising how important that final was, particularly once Arsenal started to get the wobbles towards the end of the season in the Premier League. And I think this season it feels like it's almost one level up again of importance. But the Europa League as a competition, certainly from the perspective of Arsenal, I always feel like you're so dependent on the quality of team who falls down from the Champions League. And I didn't think it was a coincidence that last season was the closest one and had Arsenal and Chelsea in the final, because the calibre of team that dropped down was not that strong compared to some seasons. This season, obviously, with Ajax, for example, coming down, they're an extremely good team. And that would be a really difficult contest were this Arsenal team, with all of its foibles, to come up against Ajax at the moment. And in the same way that once Atletico Madrid came down 2 years ago in the final Wenger season, you feared all along, even though it was a great run from Arsenal getting towards that semi-final, and it was relatively close in the end, but they were a class above in the current climate of football. So I think putting all the eggs in one basket is a tricky one, but I mean, it's really the only basket Arsenal has, so why on earth not this season? I think it would be, it would be a shame for anybody to feel sort of critical if Arteta does start to rotate and favour Europa League if Arsenal manage to get towards those sort of quarter-final onward stages.
Yeah, I mean, the other benefit of that might be to use younger players in the Premier League and give them experience ahead of next season as well, which is, obviously a key part of the way the squad is being built at the moment as well. Well, look, it's all ahead of us. It's all very interesting and fascinating and exciting. And thank you as ever for being here, Amy Lawrence. We'll chat to you soon.
Absolute pleasure. Take care, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed to Amy. Great as always to talk to her, and you can find her on Twitter at AmyLawrence71, at AmyLawrence71, and writing things in The Athletic. If you're already an Athletic subscriber and you're looking for something else to subscribe to, why not become an Arsblog member on Patreon? It costs just €5 a month. You get access to exclusive bonus content. You get ad-free podcasts, ad-free Arsblog apps, Discord chat server. We do YouTube live streams. We've got one of those coming up. We do other podcasts like Waffle, in which James and I talk about anything that isn't football based on questions that you guys have. We do My Arse, the podcast in which we talk to an Arsenal fan about their life and times as a Gooner, and a brand new episode of that has just dropped with BBC's Nick Bright. We talk about all kinds of things about his favourite five-a-side team, or his dream five-a-side team, I should say, his favourite Arsenal players and goals, his first Arsenal game, what a dodgy game it was to be at too. Find out more by becoming an Arsblog member on Patreon. Oh yeah, you also get the Arsblog book, Together, the Story of Arsenal's Unbeaten Season, free audiobook download as well, so you can stick that in your ears when you're doing whatever it is you do when you put things in your ears, like walking the dog or doing the dishes, whatever it might be. £5 a month, patreon.com/Arsblog, patreon.com/Arsblog. Okay, it appears as if Arsenal are on the verge of making their first signing of the January transfer window. Many people would have expected a central midfielder, perhaps even a central defender, but it looks as if we're going to sign a left-back from PSG called Layvin Kurzawa. With me to discuss the transfer and all the bits and pieces that surround it from OneFootball, it's Phil Costa. Hiya, Phil.
Hi, Andrew. How's it going?
Not bad, thanks. Let's talk about him. Let's just examine this from a purely footballing point of view. There are some facets to this deal and this transfer which I think merit quite a bit of discussion. But just on face value, as a footballer, as a left-back, Arsenal obviously have a problem with Kieran Tierney, who's going to be out until March. Sead Kolasinac has been playing through injury and has picked up a thigh strain, which may be more serious than we understand it if they've moved so quickly for a left back. What's this guy like, and what sort of a history has he got in the game?
I mean, when he first broke onto the scene at Monaco, he was this sort of attacking fullback who would be virtually in the opponent's third for most of the game. And that's mostly where his best football came under Claudio Ranieri and Leonardo Jardim in particular. So as a young player bursting onto the scene, he had this incredible reputation for, getting to the byline as much as possible. And then slowly, as time's progressed, it's sort of as if his game's changed. He's gone to more of a steady, we'll do the defensive work, but we'll leave the attacking work to everyone else, which is quite strange considering he's only 27 still. So normally you'd expect that in a maybe a veteran fullback who hasn't got the legs to get up and down anymore, but his role has transformed completely. But I mean, as a player, it's difficult to assess the last two seasons because he's been completely in and out of the side under Thomas Tuchel. And as mentioned previously, a lot of his best work came before the move to PSG at Monaco. So, I mean, on the whole, he's flirted in and out of the France team, but he's lost that position completely now. And the links were originally quite surprising, but as you think about it, maybe he's becoming more of a sensible option.
Okay, I mean, one of the things that might attract Arsenal to this deal is the fact that he is out of contract in the summer. It might well be a very cost-effective way of filling a position that we have to fill. So is that something that you think might be part of why Arsenal are looking at this guy?
I mean, it's not surprising. Even after we sort of spent the 80-odd million on Pepe, or however it's going to be paid. We know that Arsenal are fundamentally strapped for money, especially after spending it looks like it's going to be 4 seasons out of the Champions League now. So it's not surprising to see Arsenal take these cost-effective routes into the market, especially when there's quite a bit to be done on the squad, on quite an aging squad in general. In terms of whether he could sort of fit the role or not, I think he's been doing that exact same sort of backup role at PSG behind, it was Yuri Bečić under Unai Emery, and now it's sort of developed into Bernat under Thomas Tuchel. So, I mean, as I said before, it's not a signing that will massively excite fans or draw fans into the ground, for example. But I think for a steady option with plenty of experience, both in Europe and domestically, it seems like a sort of sensible one to do.
Yeah. Now, when we look at the deal and when we look at the fact that the player has recently changed his agent to Kia Joorabchian, who, as we know, is one of the super agents, I guess you would classify. There are a number of them in the game, but he is certainly one of them. We know that there are links between Kia Joorabchian and Edu, who is the Arsenal technical director. Joorabchian, I think, is well known as well to Raul Sanllehi, who is Arsenal's head of football, and he is apparently over there as we speak, in advanced talks for this guy. There are people who might be concerned at the way that kind of recruitment is carried out, that it was suggested the contacts book would be the way in which Arsenal find players, rather than, let's say, what people might consider a more modern way of doing it, which is, scouting, statistical analysis, and some of the stuff that we saw from Sven Mislintat, for example. But other clubs do it in a different way. That this might just set a few alarm bells ringing for people who have concerns about that in the first place.
That's completely understandable. I will say that the relationship between Joorabchian and Edu probably got the David Luiz deal done quicker than it would have got done towards another club. And judging by how quickly this story has sort of broken onto the Athletic and stuff, it seems like this has been done quite quickly as well. So maybe that could be a more positive side of things. But absolutely, I think the second you get into bed with these super agents, you always run the risk of being held liable to them. Whereas, we saw the other day with Tottenham and their signing of Jedson Fernandes from Benfica, they were completely out of any speculation for 2 weeks. We saw him linked to West Ham, Manchester United and Chelsea. And then as soon as George Mendes gets involved, he goes to the club where Jose Mourinho is managing. It's and even Mino Raiola, with the whole Pogba stuff, and he's just been a disaster to deal with for Manchester United. So thankfully for us, I think Joorabchian is quite low-key, doesn't really mouth off a lot in the press, which is nice. But I think the links to Edu and Raul Sanllehi are definitely ones to keep an eye on for the future, whereas for now, I think that relationship is just sort of blossoming, shall we say, for Arsenal, even if it isn't for the individuals involved. I think a lot of deals could be done like this in the future. I know we've been linked to that Brazilian midfielder as well, Bruno Guimaraes. So that will be an interesting one to keep an eye on as well. Yeah,
I mean, look, we know that George Mendes was involved in the Pepe signing. It was widely reported during the summer that Arsenal brought George Mendes on board to help sanction that deal. So, there are reasons, I think, to be a little bit concerned about how the recruitment is taking place. Some people might say, well, look, it's a really quick and easy way to get deals done. If you need a player, you call up this agent. He's got all these available players or people that are available to him, and Bob's your uncle. You don't have to spend ages and ages and ages trying to get deals done, doing negotiations and everything else. But it is a little bit of a worry that at a time where the club is in this sort of flux, isn't it, from an executive point of view, that super agents, again, to use that phrase, are kind of getting their feet under the table in a pretty substantial way.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that this could be a problem moving forward. it's when it gets to the stages of Valencia, for example, where George Mendes basically funneled players through there. And it wasn't just the odd signing here and there, it was 5 or 6 every summer. Or, you know, when Chelsea signed Alexandra Pato for 6 months, who was clearly unfit and unbothered about football. But, you know, and he was shafted off to Chelsea just so he could move Oscar off to China, which was Jarabchian as well, coincidentally. So I think small transfers like Luiz and Kurzawa, while the links to Jarabchian will maybe concern fans if you read beyond the transfers itself, that's perfectly reasonable. But I think if you actually look at the players, how quickly we needed the deals done, the state of our squad, for now, I say that lightly, for now, it doesn't seem to be too big of an issue, although it should definitely be an afterthought.
Yeah, I mean, look, it probably speaks to the way that recruitment was or is being done. Like, perhaps there needs to be a more holistic review of the way recruitment takes place at Arsenal, that if we're in a position where we're having to do deals quickly, maybe it suggests that there's a lack of strategy, a lack of planning. I mean, if you need a left back, that's understandable when Kieran Tierney, dislocates his shoulder and is going to be out until March. But that took place, whatever that was now, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. You know that Sead Kolasinac is not the most robust when it comes to injuries. He's had his spells on the sidelines as well. That there's time to put something in place that doesn't necessarily have to go through that kind of agent and that kind of process. So, yeah, look, if it's a couple of small deals, I think it's something we can live with. If it becomes a bit more widespread, then I think, we're right to have some worries. Just in terms of Kurzawa, he isn't somebody, I think, from doing a quick bit of reading around, that PSG fans are going to miss. Because you say, his best football was played at Monaco. He doesn't seem to have done well at PSG. He's had a lot of injuries. He's missed quite a lot of football, from everything from calf strains, thigh strains, hamstring injuries. He's had knee problems. He's had pubitis, God love him, herniated discs. He's missed a lot of football over the last little while. And one particular website I had a look at, which is PSG Talk, rate him as one of the 5 worst signings that PSG have made in the last decade. Maybe a little harsh, and there could be an element of personal bias in that regard. But Get French Football News at GFFN say Kurzawa is exceptionally injury prone, criminally unfit, and has not been playing regular football for the best part of the last 4.5 years. So, even with your most optimistic hat on, it's reasonable to have some concerns about this one.
Yeah, a ringing endorsement from those sources.
Yeah.
Look, I think where we should stand on Kurzawa is somewhere in the middle. Look, there's no denying that he's incredibly injury prone, and that's, that information is available for everyone to see, especially in the last 2.5 seasons, I'd say, under Thomas Tuchel. He hasn't just not been involved in the first team. It's been like out of matchday squads entirely. I know Tuchel is quite demanding and rigorous in his preparation, but, especially when we're looking to sign cover for our injured left backs, plural, to single out someone who's had a long injury, problem, it is not ideal. So,
just sorry to cut across you, but if Tuchel is demanding, so too is Mikel Arteta. And, the players, he's talked about it, and the players have talked about how physically demanding the football Arteta wants them to play is. Yeah,
absolutely. It's difficult to see when they would have scouted him, because, as I said, he's only made 6 Ligue 1 starts this season. I mean, he started on Wednesday night against Monaco in the 4-1 win. But he generally hasn't played a lot this year. So I know David Ornstein and James McNicholas said that Arsenal representatives were at the game. But I mean, I'm not sure what they can really grasp from such a small sample size.
Yeah.
Look, there's no denying his injury problems, and there's a sort of vibe around him and his social media that he's not the most serious player, which probably won't go down well with a lot of Arsenal fans. He likes to be out and, in his designer gear and doing all these, rap sort of music-y videos. I mean, which is fine. I'm not too bothered about that sort of stuff personally, but it might bother some people. But again, even when he has played, his stats are relatively steady, especially defensively. He's improved, in my opinion, from what I've seen. And his passing is very sort of neat and tidy, which is what you'd want from someone in that position when you see Sead Kolasinac struggling. I mean, he has improved a lot this season compared to last season, but he's still very unreliable on the ball. So he's neat and tidy. He's not really a front-footed defender, so he won't be giving away cheap fouls and free kicks. But as I said, the transfer won't excite people, but it just seems generally to be a depth addition. And I think what the transfer says to us is not about the player that we want to have, it's about the players that we do have. Tierney's obviously out until March, but maybe they will sort of ease him in slowly, just to get him fully acclimatized to English football. And there's obviously concerns about Kolasinac, both on the injury front and with his ability. So that might speak to an exit in the summer.
Yeah.
Or, we might not know about a serious injury that he's been playing with this time. So, and as well, it just moves Bukayo Saka away from left back as well, who's done a great job, honestly. I think it's not going to be one who he's not going to draw fans to the Emirates exactly, and he's not going to revolutionise the position for Arteta. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not a terrible deal. And I think we maybe need to wait for some more information about Tierney and Kolasinac before we lose our shit, basically.
Yeah, well, look, he comes with a clean slate, as every player does, and we can only judge him on what he does in red and white if he signs. So that's fair enough, and that's something that every new signing should be granted. It's worth exploring his form and his injuries and maybe the background to the signing. But you're right, I think it does speak to a departure in the summer, because you don't keep three left backs in the squad. No. Having paid £25 million for Kieran Tierney in the summer or last summer, it basically means that this is the end for, say, Kolasinac in the summer. So it's got that extra little bit as well, because I don't think maybe it's the case that Kolasinac wants to leave. Mm-hmm. But it certainly doesn't leave any room or much room for interpretation as to what's going to happen in the summer.
No, I mean, that's my take. I think they've invested £25 million in Kieran Tierney. What we have seen from him this season has been encouraging. But maybe having looked at Hector Bellerin and Rob Holding, they just want to ease him back, try not to rush him, let his body, fully acclimatise to what is an incredibly intense Premier League game nowadays. And I think, especially with the wages that Kolasinac is on, there'll be, I mean, if they're going to move anyone on in the summer, it's going to be him. So I think maybe this deal is being done with a future decision in mind.
All right. Well, look, thank you very much indeed for the info. Really appreciate it. We'll wait and see what happens if he does become indeed the first signing of this January window. Hopefully not the last. Phil Costa, thanks a million.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed to Phil. He is on Twitter @_Phil Costa, @_Phil Costa. As yet, details about the Kurzawa deal are a little bit vague. So maybe, just thinking about it now, a loan deal might be best or might be well suited for all parties. It means Arsenal can get in a player without having to make a huge commitment right now. The player himself gets 6 months of regular-ish football, which he doesn't appear to be getting at PSG. It gives him a chance to move in the summer on a Bosman, which every player would at least like the opportunity to, because you get many more options. And of course, there's a financial benefit for that. And if Arsenal are thinking about bringing in a new left-back in the summer, maybe this 6 month period with a loan signing allows us to go out and scout and find a player who could perhaps understudy Kieran Tierney or be somebody who in a year's time or 2 years' time could really push Kieran Tierney, assuming that Tierney is going to be our first choice left back next season once he's fit and ready to go. I know people have some concerns about that, but I do remember Gael Clichy having an awful lot of injury problems as a young player in his early 20s and what have you, but he found fitness and stayed fit, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Kieran Tierney could do exactly the same thing. But look, we'll wait and see what happens with this deal and whether it goes through. It looks very much like something is happening anyway. So, time will tell, and time will tell what else this transfer window brings. Doesn't appear to be doing an awful lot at this moment in time, but as we've seen with this one, it just sort of has come out of nowhere. So, the same thing could happen for a central midfielder or a centre half. Stop laughing. Stop laughing, please. You never know. So Arsenal face Sheffield United on Saturday, a team who beat us earlier this season, a team who right now, as we speak, and as I desperately tried to bring up the Premier League table in front of me to make it sound like I had it here the whole time and I'm not just thinking about doing it right now, sit in 6th place on 32 points. Arsenal are in 10th place on 28 points. We are the underdogs. Mighty Sheffield United visit the Emirates, and they're a good team. And I thought it was really, really interesting what Mikel Arteta said at his press conference the other day. He talked about how good they were. He talked about how well organised they were. He talked about, the season that they've had, the way that they play, how effective they are. And he said, I have already warned the players. You remember after the Leeds game, the first half against Leeds, in which we were played off the park by a high-pressing Leeds side, and Arteta afterwards basically said, I fucking told them they were going to do this. I told them, and they didn't listen. And obviously he gave them that halftime hairdryer. I think he's given them a bit of a pre-game hairdryer, or certainly a stern talking to remind them that this is a team that, despite the fact they were only just promoted, we cannot take lightly, just because we're at home, just because we're Arsenal. We have absolutely no right to think we can just turn up and beat this team, because I think that's kind of what we did earlier in the season, and they showed us that that was a very, very poor way to prepare for a game against Sheffield United. We don't have Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, of course. He is suspended for 3 games. A big weight of goal-scoring responsibility falls on Alexander Lacazette, but not just him. Of course, he's the main striker now, and the spotlight will be on him. His form has been poor. He doesn't seem able to find the conviction that's required in front of goal at this moment in time. But we know that he can score goals, and when he does score goals, the vast majority of them come at the Emirates. But there are other players in this team who could step up. Nicolas Pepe, he's now 6-7 months into his Arsenal career. He should be settled. He should start to repay some of that transfer fee, and I'm not saying that's on him, of course, but he's at a period of the season now where we need him to be the record signing, and there's just no escaping that. Mesut Ozil hasn't scored a goal all season. It would be a good time for him to chip in with a goal. We've got Gabriel Martinelli, who we know can score goals, but is 18. There aren't a lot of goals in this team, so it's incumbent on some of the senior players maybe to step up and to take that responsibility on. And if they do, then we give ourselves a chance. If not, Sheffield United are a difficult team to play against. They may not be the most potent in front of goal, but they certainly can cause you problems. They're well organised defensively, and if you were chasing a game against them, I'm not sure that you could feel all that confident. So let's hope that we can put together a good performance. We do need a win. We have had some positive things happen to us over the last number of weeks, some positive aspects to our performances in our football, but we need to start translating those into results. Results are what will really drive this team towards the end of the season, give them confidence, and hopefully allow them to play better and better each week, which isn't to say, of course, that all our problems are solved or anything like that, but it is one game at a time territory. It's a very busy week week as well, because we've got Sheffield United on Saturday and then Chelsea on Tuesday. So there's a lot going on this week. We've got to prepare ourselves for. So join myself and James on Sunday for an Arscast Extra. We won't be doing it on Monday. We'll be doing it at some point on Sunday. So that will be available for you on Sunday. But I suspect it'll probably be Sunday evening. So if you want to leave it, it should be there for you first thing Monday morning for your commute to work or whatever it might be. We'll have that Arscast Extra for you there. We'll talk about the Sheffield United game. We'll look ahead to the Chelsea game and lots more besides, no doubt. As ever, thank you very much indeed for listening. We will leave it there. Catch you on the next one, folks. Take it easy. Cheers. Bye-bye. A day in the life of a completely fictional football executive.
Oh, what a terrible day. Oh, things could not be any worse than they are today because this new coach, oh my God, he is so demanding. I don't have a left back. I need a left back. Give me a left back. Where am I supposed to get a left back? I spent all the money in the summer on a very high-priced winger of no particular name. Now I'm supposed to find a left back from somewhere? They are not like rabbits you can pull out of a hat like a magician. And I'm not Paul Daniels, even though we are basically the same height. Oh, what am I going to do? Hey, wait a minute, I just thought of something. I make a phone call. Bring, 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 bring. Hello? Hello, agent friend of mine. How are you? Do you happen to have a left back going spare by any chance? What's that? You just brought in a new left back this week? And somehow he is available for transfer? Oh my God, you have saved my day. Thank you, my kind and philanthropic agent friend. Where would I be without you?